Mykhaylo Mudryk, tell me, talk to me, educate me. I really do not know where I sit on this one. I hope you're all doing well, but I thought what we could do today is have a bit of a conversation about Mykhaylo Mudryk. Right, let's be totally frank, up until now, it hasn't worked, but we also must be patient. We aren't writing anyone off here. We know that this is a long game. We know that what Chelsea have done with this signing is sign a project. We know that Chelsea have signed somebody for the future, somebody who they believe is capable of winning a Ballon d'Or. And therefore, what we're doing now is only dealing with what we've seen so far. So we aren't writing the player off. We will judge this player properly in, I would say, a year from now. In a year from now, I think that we can say definitively who Mykhaylo Mudryk is. For now, I do believe that the jury is out, but I would love your opinions on what you have seen so far. Tell you what, when he burst onto the pitch at Anfield, I thought that it could change our season. He felt like the jewel in the crown that we were desperate for. It felt Eden Hazard-like. I thought this is the player that is going to propel Chelsea into Champions League qualification. And he basically hasn't done anything right since. That game at Anfield feels such a long time ago. And I wonder if that game, that moment that he had there, is the worst thing that could have happened to him, because it set the bar so high. It made us believe that we had a player who was going to reinvigorate our entire season, and it certainly hasn't worked out that way. Since then, though, he really hasn't looked good. He has looked totally devoid of ideas. He's looked low on confidence, and I don't really know what he is supposed to be doing, and this is crucial. For Graham Potter, he is never the answer. Now, as you well know, I don't believe that Graham Potter is the oracle, far from it, but crucially, he is the Chelsea manager, and the office of Chelsea manager deserves to be respected. So, Graham Potter, who watches Mykhaylo Mudryk in training every day of the week, whatever question is posed of Graham Potter, Mykhaylo Mudryk is never the answer. That's a concern. Graham Potter, through his own idiocy, has found himself in some terrible situations as Chelsea manager. And whatever those situations are, we've seen a lot of variables here. We've seen Chelsea losing away at Tottenham. Mykhaylo Mudryk comes on with 7 minutes to go. What is he supposed to do? So, when the game could have been won earlier in that day, Graham Potter decided that Mykhaylo Mudryk wasn't the option. Brings him on with 7 minutes to go. Totally different situation, but again, it ended in a comparative disaster. Chelsea are at home to Everton and we're winning. Christian Pulisic has to go off. Christian Pulisic, who was playing very well, goes off. The player that we choose to bring on. Do we bring on Mudryk? Do we go for the jugular of Everton? Do we try and go 2, 3, 4-0 up? Do we give Everton and Sean Dyche and Ian Wone something to worry about? Do we give them something to think about? Or do we ignore Mykhaylo Mudryk and bring on Conor Gallagher? I think on one level you can make the case that if we're bringing on Gallagher, it isn't about Mudryk because we are making a tactical decision rather than a personnel decision. But what I would say is he has made the tactical decision based upon the personnel available. And he has therefore decided that Mudryk is not the answer. And has therefore shifted the entire team, changed the entire formation to accommodate Gallagher and not use Mudryk. Like recently, he was dreadful for the Ukraine, wasn't he? I thought that, and I hoped on some level, that he was going to be able to use that game at Wembley for the Ukraine, the eyes of the nation on that fixture. I thought he was going to be able to use that as a springboard to announce himself to England. But it didn't quite work out. I was thinking that England could win the game 2-3, 4-1, and Mykhaylo Mudryk would score and have a really good game and awaken here. But it was terrible. He had a terrible game. He only lasted an hour. That step over just before he got dispossessed by Harry Kane, of all people. That moment where Zinchenko found him, the ball slips under his foot, subbed early. It really wasn't his day. Now, I'm probably being a bit harsh here. If you're playing for the Ukraine at Wembley against this England team, this dazzling England team, it's not going to be easy for you. And we should be careful about how severely we judge Mudryk on this performance. Ukraine are nowhere near as good as England. England are sensational. And unfortunately for Mudryk, he's up against Kyle Walker. That is the worst possible player that he can play against. Everything that Mudryk apparently excels at, Kyle Walker is the antidote to players like Mykhaylo Mudryk. So it's so unfortunate that Mykhaylo Mudryk in that situation is up against one of the best players in the world in his position. So again, we have to be careful how we judge him, but we also have to say what we see. And in that game, Mykhaylo Mudryk is a jewel in the crown of that Ukrainian side. He would have been responsible for carrying the hopes of the nation, and he didn't deliver. Whatever excuses there are, whatever reasoning there is, the facts are Mykhaylo Mudryk did not deliver. It's non-negotiable. He played for 61 minutes, and in those 61 minutes, he gave the ball away 12 times and had one shot. So it obviously didn't go his way. That isn't necessarily a huge deal. Playing against England at Wembley with Kyle Walker man marking you is so difficult, but we can only judge what we've seen. Chelsea, everybody connected with the club. The owner, down to the fans, down to everybody at Stamford Bridge, have to remain positive about Mudryk. We have no option but to believe that Mudryk will come good. We have to. It's part of who we are now. We need Mykhaylo Mudryk to come good because he represents so much. He is symbolic of so much. He is our statement signing. He is the marquee player that we desperately needed. He was the answer to all of our creativity problems. He was the solution to our lack of firepower up front. Our goal scoring needed to be improved, and he was going to help on that front. He's also the personification of how we demonstrated our dominance over Arsenal. Anybody that likes to have that debate, London is blue, red, whatever nonsense you want to spout, Mykhaylo Mudryk is part of that conversation. He's symbolic of our pulling power, our financial muscle, if you care about such things. And crucially, he is contracted at Chelsea for the next 77 years. Also, it's important to remember that he is a player. This season, we've seen it. Well, not for Chelsea, but we have seen it this season. In the Champions League this season, he was phenomenal for Shakhtar, whilst playing against teams that are far better than Shakhtar. You know, he lit it up against Real Madrid. He was fantastic against Leipzig. There's a player in there. We just need to locate it in the Premier League. But there is a worry. If Graham Potter is going to be Chelsea manager for the long haul, and sadly, it feels like that could be the case. Potter, when it works, when it seems to be falling into place, he has a formation that I don't think has room to accommodate Mykhaylo Mudryk. Potter likes a 3-4-2-1, give or take, doesn't he? When things are going well for him, good luck finding them. But if they are going well for him, that is generally the shape that he likes his team to take. 3-4-2-1. In that system, where on earth is Mykhaylo Mudryk supposed to play? So it really has been an underwhelming start for Mykhaylo Mudryk. But a lot of it isn't his fault. You know, the price tag, 88.5 million quid or whatever it was, that wasn't his fault. The fact that it was almost a soap opera, the way he arrived at the club, the toing and froing with Arsenal and all of that London is blue stuff, he cannot be held accountable for that. That is agents and money grabbers galore. That isn't Mudryk himself. And it's certainly not representative of the way that he plays football. So again, when we analyse a footballer, that stuff doesn't count. But I tell you what does count, and this is very important. Did you see at the end of the game at Wembley, Ben Chilwell waited to go off and escort him off the Wembley turf together? I think it was a show of unity to show that there is consideration and love for Mudryk at the club. You know, his parents are still living in Kiev. He has to talk to them on the phone to find out what the situation is. Things like that are going to impact performance. And therefore, I think it really is important that we are generous with our judgment of this player. I think that there is clearly a glorious footballer lurking in there. We haven't yet seen it in a Chelsea shirt, but we have to be patient. So I really would like to hear your thoughts on this. Do you believe that Mykhaylo Mudryk is going to be the player that perhaps De Zerbi suggested that he could be, you know, linked to a Ballon d'Or and things like that? Or do you think that ultimately the performances that we saw at Shakhtar are a little bit of a misnomer? He won't be able to reproduce that sort of level of performance in such a competitive league as the Premier League. Really interested to hear your thoughts here because, to be totally frank with you, I don't know. I desperately hope that he comes good. We desperately need him to come good, but I like him and he's obviously been through so much. Like, I was reading about the journey that a lot of the Ukrainian players had to go to get to Wembley. They were travelling for 48 hours, some of them. Like, it's just not possible to fly across the Ukraine and it makes life very difficult. So I do think that we need to suspend our judgment. I just think that there is a real worry, particularly the fact that Graham Potter just doesn't seem to fancy him at the moment. Keen to hear your thoughts on this. Please let me know. And if you're new around here, I would love it if you would consider clicking the subscriber button. It massively helps me out and I would love to welcome you into this community. Thanks so much for watching and I really do hope that you have a wonderful day. Ta-da.